Welcome to Leadership Development News, Profiles and Practices of Top Performers. I'm Dr. Relly Nadler. Dr. Kathy Greenberg and I have been doing this podcast now for 18 years, and we've been rated the #1 leadership development podcast from FeedSpot, over the years. And so we're always trying to get new tools, tips, things that can help you as a leader, can help you as an individual contributor. And I'm really excited to talk with Dr. Lois Phillips today. I've known Lois for a long time. She has her PhD in Confluent Ed, and I have my master's in Confluent Ed, so we've connected over the years. And Lois, I'm going to do her intro in just a moment, but we're going to be talking about shattering the glass ceiling and avoiding the glass cliff. So, if you've been listening to our show, we've always talked about emotional intelligence, tips, tools. Why? Everything is more now, more pressure, more anxiety, more loneliness, more risks that people are taking, and things are somewhat incomprehensible at times. And we all are shaking our heads about what's kind of going on. And so we all need support. We all need the ability to move forward. And sometimes it's just those small things that you will do in the moment that can make a big difference. And I'll share one more thing. My co-host, Dr. Kathy Greenberg, in just a moment, and then we'll do the bio for Lois. But I like to say from research, because we're always evidence-based, there's a lot of blind spots that managers have. We all think as a manager that we're recognizing good work. That's a need for any leader. And in the research, managers say, oh, yeah, I do it 59% of the time. The people who are receiving that feedback, only they say 35% of the time. Providing feedback is valuable. Managers say, yeah, I do that 50% of the time. People who should be receiving the feedback say, not really, only 20% of the time. So a little bit of the why we need this, why we need emotional intelligence, and especially Women's Month. We really want to hear about some of the tips and tools that Lois has. But I know, Catherine, you want to say a word? Welcome before we bring on Lois.
No, everything's great. It's great to see you again, Lois. It's been a long time, and I know you've been doing amazing work in the field of promoting what we know to be the most amazing work, which is, of course, for Women's Month, that which is done by folks like us. And I can't help but be biased given who I am. So it's good to see you again.
All right, let me just do a quick little intro, and then we'll bring on our Lois Phillips is a former university executive, consultant to colleges and universities for strategic planning. But she's written extensively about gender and women's advancement, which we'll hear. Her opinion essays and articles about communication strategies to advance women in the workplace and politics have been published in local venues and MS Magazine. She helps executives and political candidates develop their messaging and the speeches for stakeholders, voters, and boards. During this interview, she's going to discuss women's advancement, the slow progress of systemic changes shown by corporate cultures in particular, and kind of what's going on now, so this is really valuable. And while women have moved into middle management positions equal to men, the term glass ceiling, which she'll deconstruct, developed as a shorthand of discussing the barriers that women face when they advance to the C-suite and top levels of management. So, Lois, welcome. So good to see you.
Thank you so much. I'm so happy to be talking with both of you.
So, Lois, as you know from having been with us in the past, we like to start off by giving the audience an opportunity to get to know you and talk a little bit about those people in your life who have been a major influence for you and the direction that you've taken, and kind of give those people who are new to us after 18 years on the air,
Amazing.
um, yeah, a little opportunity to peek inside Lois.
Well, nobody's ever put it to me quite that way. So thank you. I'm so happy to be talking with both of you because these conversations really make me think and make me think differently about my assumptions as well. You're such great interviewers. I knew that you were going to hit me with this question, so I've been thinking about it. And I have to say, given that I'm a senior consultant and I thought back, there really weren't systems in place to have role models and mentors and networks for people like me when I was growing up. So I was thinking about, who supported me and who thought that I had possibly some value in the business world or professional life. And it really wasn't until college. And I think that's when we often meet somebody who's very inspiring. And I majored in speech communication at Queens College in New York and had these amazing people on the faculty who demonstrated how to communicate both interpersonally within groups. And I took a lot of courses in media and broadcasting. So I learned by watching. And there was only one professor who said, you've got something, and I want you to continue to develop yourself, and I see you having potential.
Wow.
And it was very shocking to me because I never saw myself as having potential to be exceptional in any way, seriously. And I talked to my friends today about this, and they laugh because we know the process of evolving and maturation, but I was really quite shy until college. And so I always think about role models as being very important for people. We talk about systems that have mentors and, networking and all of those things. But, you can watch someone and say, and I remember watching Gloria Steinem the first time she spoke. And I remember thinking, I want that. I want to know how to be funny and kind of sexy and outrageously intellectual and say things that people never thought of before. So I would say that. And just one second thing is, certainly as I went on in life, there were people I met who were very successful and showed me the ropes to skip and the ropes to jump, as we say. But
True.
I learned so much from my peers, from peers who were along the same path as I was. And they were the ones who said it. When you gave that speech, I didn't like your introduction, and the kind of honest feedback you can take
Yeah.
from people you trust.
Well, Lois, that's great. I'm going to just share something, and then we'll talk about the glass ceiling. So we were both are in this Confluent Ed program. I was the youngest one in the program at that when I got my master's in 24. And I remember I had to do a project. It was about kind of an outward bound program, and then I was going to use all the things I learned, and I was going to do that in groups. And George Brown, who started the program that you're way familiar with, I
Yes.
was highly anxious. I caught him in the hall, and I said, George, I'm not sure about this. And I'm going, I'm trying to do this. I'm trying to do this. And George said, "Give me your hand." And then I put my hand out, and he said, and he went like this. "You got my seal of approval. You'll be able to figure out whatever you need." And he turned around and walked away. Kind of even gives the chills as I say that now. It's like, okay. So that was, probably all of 3 minutes, but it was a defining moment,
Yeah.
and I think like you're saying, these people can be so powerful.
Yeah, and there are those moments you remember, right? The sentences, the feedback,
Yeah.
the I trust you, you'll be fine, be yourself, are so memorable, and people don't often realize the effect they have on you when they show their trust. And
Exactly.
I know that's related to your work, both of you.
I just want to jump in here quickly because our audience has changed so dramatically over the last decade, and we're working in a four generational environment these days with Gen Z as well as millennials. And I've had people come up to me and honestly ask, when I mention wonderful American journalists like Gloria Steinem. You know, who was Gloria Steinem? And just for those of you who are listening, if you don't know, Gloria Steinem is now 90 years old. And she is kind of a landmark for many of us in terms of the victory that those of you who are living in the current time may not recognize, but a really important landmark for those of us who came through a generation of bias. And we're going to talk a little bit about this in our show today, Lois, that glass ceiling that many people had to rise above and break through. So for those of you who started Googling, you know, who is this Gloria Steinem person? Hopefully one of these days we're going to do a documentary about her like we've done for Katharine Graham. So
Yes, exactly. You know, when I was thinking about the show, I was thinking, okay, who were the women who broke new ground and who were the role models? I thought of Katharine Graham. She was the first woman in the Fortune 500 who owned the Washington Post publisher and brilliant. Film made about her. And of course, we have Oprah Winfrey, who was the first woman to become a billionaire and African American to have a talk show. And then let's see who else. Ellen DeGeneres broke new ground, becoming an entertainer, came out of the closet and made it okay. So, you know, these are people who change our consciousness about what's possible for women, gay, African American, older. I think she may have even inherited the post. I'm not sure. But what a brave new world they entered, and with all the skepticism about their capacity, or, you know, is it too early to come out of the closet? Is it, you know, is it okay to have a talk show? And they had to constantly be dealing with those questions besides showing their competence, which is really what leaders are supposed to be doing. But, you know, there's always the skepticism issue you're navigating. You know, are you sure? Is it too early? So.
So you're circling around the glass ceiling. So
Okay, I'm ready.
just for our audience, tell us what the glass ceiling is, and do you think it still exists?
Oh, yes, I have some answers for that. So first of all, you know, the glass ceiling, just picture yourself in a room and you're looking up to this place you want to get to, and you can see it, it's there, but you can't get there. And there's an invisible barrier between you and that space. And I like to say, although I haven't seen this written anywhere, but I've learned this from my consulting. I know you two have also. That's the place of strategic thinking, the place of visioning, really exciting place to be. And, you know, I've been able to be there, and it was really very different from being a manager or a director, because that's where the innovative thinking is, like, what if? And so you know, I was looking at the numbers and statistics around where women are where we find women, and it does exist. And honestly, I have to give you a couple of statistics for those people who are saying, "Oh, come on, women are so liberated. Companies want talent. We want to retain talent if we find it." But we have 51% of the population, 26% of the Senate, 29% of the House of Representatives in government, 24% of governors, 49% of lieutenant governors, and mayors only 27%. And by the way, being a mayor, if anyone's listening and you're tempted, being a mayor is an amazing way to understand what's happening in this country. So in the Fortune 500, we have 10% women. In the Fortune 1000, we have 9% women deans of law schools, 14%. But who's in law school? 51% are women. Medical school, equal women and men today, but only 28% are deans, and some are in interim roles, which we can talk about later. So, I mean, the numbers, I just want your listeners to know we really haven't reached, you know, full equality, but women are earning more BAs than men, and we're just as there's no difference according to every psychological test in our intelligence. We are equally intelligent or equally dumb, but we are not different. So I just had to put that out so people understand we're not kidding here. We're not kidding.
Well, it's fascinating. There's a company that I was taking a look at called the Glass Ceiling app, and it literally helps women in any job search look for organizations that are basically supportive of women, but even more, they talk about not being quote unquote male dominated organizations. Now, I'm thinking about this conversation in light of what's going on currently, right, in the political world where DEI is DIE for the most part, at least across the federal government. And I've had several friends who I work with in this space who've said, I'm devastated. I had a conference coming up in April that I've been working on for 2 years that has just been pretty much canceled. They're telling me it's postponed, but it's without scheduling. And then I have family members that are getting married, same-sex family members getting married. And there's a lot of confusion right now. One of them is employed by the United States Department of Defense. And there's a lot of questions. So what we're going to do, hopefully, in this hour that we have with you, Lois, is talk about some of these issues, what people are doing about them, and how we can stay informed to make better decisions. We're going to take a quick break, so don't go away. You're listening to Leadership Development News.
Welcome back to Leadership Development News. We're talking with Dr. Lois Phillips, and you can get in touch with Lois at her website, loisphillips.com, or you want to email her, lois.com. And Lois, you have so much experience, one as a communicator, speaker, doing strategy with organization, and especially the focus on women's issues. I know you took to my daughter, who's now in a master's program, and helping her look at her applications and stuff. So I want to publicly thank you for that. And so
Thank you.
as we're talking about the glass ceiling, is it higher for some women more than others? Maybe LGBTQ or women of color or older women. I mean, it's there, but what do you know about that?
Well, first of all, the glass ceiling is there for marginalized groups, for people who are coming to this country as refugees, for people who have a disability, for older people who want to advance. And then, as we know, young executives come in who are 25 or 30 years old, and they don't necessarily, respect the wisdom. So, I think that it's a complicated topic. We can talk about what the system does to inhibit women from advancing. We can talk about what the individuals do to stop themselves from advancing. So let me start
Yeah.
with what individuals can do. I think that systems can be intimidating in terms of a survey, I think by McKinsey, said 77% of the women interviewed, and it was an enormous survey conducted with lean in databases. 77% said they're not sure how to advance to the C-suite. They simply don't know. It's a mystery. But they do see that their peers who are male colleagues coming in, or younger men, very quickly advancing because of golfing or shadowing their boss or training opportunities they get. And I think, one thing has occurred to me, and it certainly was true for me, that women are often intimidated about spreadsheets. I would often say, what's between those spreadsheets? Teasing someone, saying, you got to know what's under the sheets. But seriously, I think women are intimidated about really understanding how to read a spreadsheet and how to get into the financial information about the company. And I think the training opportunities they find to shift from one functional area, and they're often found in HR, for example, or in products, customer service, the softer side of the organization. But to really advance, you have to bite the bullet and learn about how money moves and how money matters. So the financial domain, it can be very intimidating. And in good companies, there are opportunities to learn the skill sets you don't come in with. And so women are found in certain domains and not others. And it's easier to stay there. But, you may be a manager or a director, but getting up to that strategy suite, you really have to understand the financials and you have to understand technology. Not always the domains women are socialized to master. So that's my first answer in terms of, how you can get stuck. Is that sort of,
Yeah.
does it put us on a path?
Yeah.
So, I wanted to jump in here around some of the emotional intelligence aspects of leadership. I'm working right now with a group of future leaders on a new book called Global Leadership Future Proof, which was based on a book that I had done with Marshall Goldsmith and Alistair Robertson and Maya Huchan in 2003. And we're seeing a very distinct difference in the kinds of skills that make someone future proof. So you're not probably not going to be surprised when you hear some of these, both of you, Relly and Lois. But Lois, for you, since we want to talk about some of the emotional intelligence skills beyond the hard skills that you're describing here, like reading financial statements, or being part of R&D or marketing, right?
technology.
So, yeah, so some of the behaviors that we're seeing coming up are things like what we're calling emotional fitness,
Mm-hmm.
things like resonant relationships, things like psychological richness. And these are very different from the five former hard skills
Mm-hmm.
that we saw back in 2003. I'm curious, as you think about women and their struggles to continue to advance themselves, I think women have more, in most instances, experience with emotional intelligence and resonant relationships and things of that nature. I'm just curious if you're seeing the same thing.
Well, when I said what I said, I was making the assumption that women come to the table, in most cases and in most cultures, nurtured to be sensitive to what other people are feeling and to cultivate their relationships. But I think that when you put the two together, the hard skills and the soft skills, you've got a dynamite combination that can advance you, particularly in this very fast-paced world, with sensitivity to diversity issues in a global workplace. So, I agree. I think women, from what I was reading to prepare for today, was that certainly, men have the capacity to build relationships, and men, do well in certain situations. But women really are shown to be skillful in building cross-functional teams and the transformational leadership in democratic organizations that yield greater profitability. Let's just be blunt. Companies need to retain their edge and need to retain their profitability if we're talking about the corporate sector. And in other sectors, you want to retain talent. So you want to have people sitting around a table who bring different points of view and experience in the workplace, who are working with customers and who are dealing with finances and venture capital and multiculturalism. I mean, it's a complicated place to be at that table. So, of course, I agree with you, but I think that this ability to retain talent is critical. It takes about 18 months to get somebody to really know their job. If you have
Hmm.
somebody smart who is good with people and has those people skills, you don't want to lose them. And I think that's where, when we think about what we need to see in successful leaders, they're transformational leaders who are democratically oriented. So to me, that ties in beautifully with your premise about an EQ.
Right. And Lois, what you're talking about as far as the emotional intelligence, and I know when I talk to groups, and I'm sure you see this, sometimes I'll play the gender game. Oh, of all these competencies that you see on the screen, which one are men better at? Which one are women? People typically get it. It's empathy is the one that people get uh, right away, and they can kind of see that. And that aspect of empathy. So let me ask the two of you. I would think biologically carry a fetus and newborn, that obvious connection that's there with another heartbeat. And so now the child isn't there, but I think that sensitivity to another
Mhm.
make some comments about that.
Mhm. That's so interesting. I love the idea of the sensitivity to another heartbeat. I think we have to talk about not make assumptions because a lot of you know women are waiting to have children, right? And I know that from all these strollers in my neighborhood with twins and triplets that they're waiting until their late 30s and 40s with the help of IVF to have children. Then they have more than one. But seriously, women are far more ambitious than their mothers were and their grandmothers were. They want to be productive, they want to participate. in a larger world. So they're waiting to have that heartbeat metaphor work for them. So let's just assume for 10 years or more, that metaphor might not work. But I like the idea of the relational skills that girls are learning. And I think, the team aspect, as we see girls through Title IX playing sports at an earlier age, getting used to getting along with people they may not like that much, but they need the person who's a great first baseman, or can kick. And, learning that, you're not going to like everybody you work with, but you have to respect people for what they know and what they can contribute. And I think I'm going back to this. My preference is the sports metaphor, at least for the 10 years, before they may contemplate being
Ah,
mothers.
okay.
And fathers today, I think young men are so much more involved in parenting, and I think that's a plus. But Kathy, what do you think about this one? In his point about resonating to another heartbeat.
Well, I think that we know the science is there that shows that in quantum physics, right? All of us can be made to experience that relationship to another heartbeat. And, of course, I love everything that Relly talks about, by virtue of the fact that I've been in the longest relationship with him than any other man in my life, which he knows. And, and that's the God's honest truth. In many ways, Relly liberated me from a lot of the bad behaviors and habits that I had. And I say that with great love. And for those women who are listening, who are really wondering, let me give an example of something that Lois shared with us, which is that, and I think you did too, Relly, that women have an advantage when it comes to their emotional intelligence and self-awareness and collaboration. Indra Nooyi was one of those wonderful people, right? The CEO of PepsiCo for over a decade, who was well known for her ability to create these amazing collaborative teams. And that's what made her such a wonderful leader. And so that ability for us to recognize when someone's skills and not only their resonant relationship with you or that heartbeat that you recognize is something that you're attracted to is really important. And sometimes we have to stop and check in on what is it that I'm sensing? What is it that I'm feeling attracted to? Because we can really look at the distinctions between admiring someone's diversity in their style, right, in their makeup, in their thinking, as opposed to thinking about that attraction as something that is sexual or something that is beyond what's necessary in the moment for a collaborative relationship to create a result. And I think, there's so many women that I love, and I tell them all the time, I'm in love with your brain,
Yeah.
I just tell them, I said, look, I'm just in love with your brain. And I say that to men as well. So it's fascinating to me how we can take those words, right, to be in love with something, whether it's another heart or another brain, without having it have a sexual connotation, right?
I want to respond to that because I think, the workplace relationships I've had over the years have been very intimate, the good ones. And I think that's what you're talking about. It's the intimacy that comes when you're sharing a task with someone and you're doing something difficult. And in some cases, it's a problem that has big consequences and you solve it together. Why? Because that other person sees an option that you don't see. And there's a gratitude that we got through something tough together. I wanted to say something about a specific task that involves a kind of intimacy between people who may be warring partners, and that's in a negotiation. We've been hearing a lot, and we won't get into specifics about the value of deal making, right? But negotiation skills it's such an art. And I remember teaching a class and getting so interested in the work coming from Harvard on gender and negotiation, which I recommend to all of your listeners is to take a deep dive into what they've offered through their negotiation institute. They have great materials. But you know what you do when you negotiate is, and I've trained women, and they said it changed their lives because you learn to say, what am I willing to give up to get something better? And the other person has to say the same thing. So you say, what is it that you want to somebody? And it may be somebody you're in a crisis with or a conflict with, and you don't like them and you're upset. But you have to start reframing this as an opportunity to get something better. And I just love that. It was so empowering for these women because women don't like conflict. They want to come to a decision quickly. They want to get through it, get me done. I'll give him everything. I don't care. Take the house, take the car. But, that's not in their best interest. We're back to that strategic word.
Yeah.
This is a strategy. I want to resolve this so we both win. And that to me is really important for a leader. And it really does relate to EQ because you start thinking, what can I give this person that will make them happy? And Kathy, you've written about happiness. So we can't be casual about making someone happy. They'll forever be your friend.
So, uh, what about the other side of that? Because I would think, and again, I'm just speaking, that it's easier to give up something, especially being a woman. What about not wanting to give up and being more assertive, and then some of the unconscious bias that they're overly being firm? And maybe we can kind of talk about some of the skills that you help people with to
Mhm,
be assertive but not aggressive.
mhm,
Or being the aggressive is assumed because a guy would say the exact same thing and they're not saying he's aggressive.
mhm.
So maybe say a couple words on that before we take a break.
Okay.
Yeah, go
Are
ahead.
should
Yeah,
we
you
hold
got,
off or
you got 2 minutes. We can start it. Yeah.
so we're on and we can keep going or we're off? Okay, I'll
Yeah.
jump in. Yeah, no, I think being assertive is not being aggressive. And over the years, I have to say, I think things have changed. I think with the media, with Me Too, with, so many revelations in the media about what it looks like to work in a tough environment where you're not being seen and heard, where you're not visible, where you say something in a meeting and then nobody heard it, and then later somebody repeats it who's a male, and then it's brilliant. Those kinds of microaggressions really are painful to experience, but to be assertive is simply to be direct. And I think that I've trained women in public speaking primarily, and I've told them to be simple and stating what they want. If they're running for office, what are their values? What do they want to accomplish? And to not go on and on with long narratives, but to be very simple in their statements so people can repeat it later. So if you say, I'm interested in advancing, what skills do I need to advance? Can you help me? Is there training? And you come in prepared to be clear about what it is you'd like, and then to say, okay, I didn't get what I wanted, but I'll try again, and not to feel defeated. And that's one thing I've seen is that women are so sensitive. They take things personally often when it's simply a matter of a transaction and the person isn't in a place to give them what they want, even though they've said it beautifully and simply. The other person can't deliver yet. So come back again.
Well, that certainly makes a lot of sense. So I'm going to be simple and direct. We're going to take a break. We'll be right back. You're listening to Leadership Development News.
Welcome back to Leadership Development News. We're talking with Dr. Lois Phillips, shattering the glass ceiling, avoiding the glass cliff. So we're having a very engaging conversation about the glass ceiling and what women can do. And Lois you've already shared a lot of great points. Let's talk a little bit about women in leadership, maybe, and we talked about emotional intelligence as some of the aspects that women are a little higher in empathy and building bonds and some of the communication issues. What have you noticed? How do you coach women to be the best leader they can be?
Well, I think that that's such a big question, actually. I have to think for a second. Usually, if a woman has been hired to be in a top leadership position, she's already been vetted by, a group of decision makers who have confidence in her. But I see often her self-confidence in herself isn't equal to what their confidence in her is. And I think that, you know, there's a double standard for women and men in top leadership positions. I alluded to it before when I was talking about the skepticism and how it takes time out of the day to deal with the skepticism about appear. I'll just give you a simple example of appearance. In public education, I was doing some research on superintendents of schools, and the numbers are quite low in California. I think it's 28% of superintendents, even though women are mainly in education. And if they get there, they are in elementary school roles, superintendents. But there's questions about they have to wear skirts, not pants. When they're meeting with donors, the donors will often coach them on how to present themselves to the donor. And the donors expect them to be feminine in their style, but in the meantime, they're dealing with federal funding and DEI crises. I mean, things that really take brain power and strategy. And it's almost like they have to tap that down sometimes to deal with the press. And I think that the double standard is a very tough one because we expect leaders to be strong, decisive, know more than everyone else. And when a woman presents herself that way, she's seen as aggressive, she's seen as arrogant. And I've looked at this, sliced into it from the standpoint of rhetorical analysis and the speeches by presidents of colleges and political people. And it's a very fine line that women have to walk in terms of the way that they present themselves in public. Not too strong, not too brilliant, don't know more than everyone else, always giving credit to the team, to the collaborators. And that is not typical of the style of most men. And it's perfectly fine for a man to present himself as knowing more than everyone else and saying, I've heard from everybody and this is what we're doing. So there's a set of demands that make it very tricky. And the ones that succeed are really to be applauded. I think that they have to find the leadership traits that work well for them, and it's a blend. Basically a bliss. You might call it more androgynous style, or, it's assertive, but not too assertive. It's brilliant, it's smart, but not the only smart one in the room. It's always giving credit to, and that there's nothing wrong with that. It's just different. And I think let's be honest here. To stay in a position, to be retained as in a C-suite, you do have to cultivate allies and people around you. And you're not there by yourself.
So Kathy, I'm interested to hear what you say, because roles in two big corporate organizations, if you had to kind of pinpoint what are the key things that let a woman rise up, that kind of tightrope that Lois is talking about.
I can only speak from my own experiences, and in my experience with my own growth, in that of other women that I have mentored or coached, it's clear to me that the consistent behaviors that Lois just described are what really matter in most situations. And, I think what we're seeing a lot of in television and in the media is a very aggressive approach and a very liberal approach to some of these leadership behaviors. And I'm not sure they're real. I'm not sure they really represent the kind of behaviors that women really use in the corporate world. Let me give you an example. For me, being a good listener and using active listening is a very important leadership skill. And I think it was a great leader who I consider one of the best, Gary Burnison at Korn Ferry, who said, it's my job as a leader to leave someone feeling better about leaving my office than when they came in.
Yeah.
And, these are the kinds of things that I think are still important for women. I think what I see on television, and you see it in shows like Matlock, right, featuring, the kind of the generational breed of women who are invisible, right, compared to the generational breed of women that are getting ahead in the world. Very different. And I'm not sure we're really leaning into those negative behaviors any longer. But I think that the data that's coming out of places like Harvard and others, just as recent as 2024, are in fact saying that women are more liberal, they feel more liberated. And so there may be more of these, kind of microaggressions that women are using versus true leadership skills.
I appreciate what you said. I was thinking about Matlock too, because my niece, Joanna Klein, is the producer. And I'm so excited for that show. And I'm hearing about it, from a lot of people who are over 60, just mentioning, have you seen it? Have you seen it? But I was thinking about this. One of the values that we assign to femininity is intuition. We say, well, and it's womanly intuition, but I think that's really a sensitivity to the environment and reading clues and cues that a smart person, male or female, we wouldn't say about Relly he has womanly intuition, but I'm sure that Relly is very intuitive from his clinical work and coaching and consulting work. I think that we need to maybe come up with another word, but I think that encompasses a lot of what you're talking about. Reading cues, looking for clues, being a good detective. I think Matlock is a great example where people may not enjoy or appreciate the younger ones who are on the fast track. Let's do it fast. If you do it quickly, you can miss some of the more subtle pieces of data that are hanging in the air. And I know, really, we've talked about, watching for the person who's rolling their eyes in the meeting.
Right, yeah.
And I've done that once. It took a little courage, but I said, I noticed you're rolling your eyes when I, presented that proposal. Tell me more. And they said, well, I'm worried. And then it opened the door to, but they wouldn't have said, I'm worried about it. They just nonverbal, but I spotted it. And, he took it well. That opened the door to really saying, well, maybe it is too aggressive. Let's look at the numbers. So you see, I think it works hand in glove. And this nonverbal communication aspect is one of them, but being sensitive to what people are telling you, not tied up in your own ego. And your example, though, was a male, was of somebody who wanted you to feel good. And Kathy, maybe you can find this to be true, but there are people who can give you the worst news and you thank them. You can say, not you're fired, and thank them, but seriously say, that's not going to work. And let me tell you, and I think if you explain things to people, they can really handle bad news and feel good.
Yeah.
As your mentor probably had that capacity. Does that make sense to you?
Oh, absolutely. Working across the public safety community where I have for the last decade, I'm dealing constantly with people who are delivering bad news, and they're getting coach certified now because what they're recognizing is the importance of doing exactly what you just described. So instead of catching somebody rolling their eyes and saying, hey, I just saw you rolling your eyes, what's that about? To gently express, hey, I think I saw you rolling your eyes there. Tell me more about that, right? It's very non-defensive, right?
Yeah.
Yeah. Well, and the message is, I want to know what you're feeling. And
So
I respect it. I mean, and that respect doesn't happen in 5 minutes, Kathy. That's really what you're talking about. It's building it every day. So I want to make sure we end up talking a little bit about what the system can do and the culture can do,
yeah,
because there is that aspect to the workplace. There is a culture, it's tribal, it's a village, it's got vibes, rituals, traditions. And how do people feel included in the workplace culture? And that's it can be very subtle in terms of how you feel valued and how you feel included. And you gave an example of a conversation that made someone, or the person had the skills to make someone feel like what I say matters to my boss.
so to take that and we'll just bring it into kind of the culture that we have now, and we only got a couple minutes. But where DEI now is, like what you said, Kathy, is died, DIE. I'm dealing this week with a group who is the DEI department, and
Oh
they're
my
still
goodness.
intact, but the sense of chaos that's going there. So, any tips, tools, Lois, from you, and then maybe Kathy before we end here. In this chaos, we said everything is more, and now you have women, you have who are in the middle of this, and even the word woman, people are talking about. So go ahead, start off.
Um, I just want to say that, DEI was very revolutionary, and many people didn't like it who are ultra conservative and believe in the concept of a meritocracy, whether we had one or not. And I think DEI challenges that belief by saying, no, some people were definitely excluded on the basis of gender or race or culture, ethnicity. And it was and there's such pushback against it. But Kathy, I think you also have some experience with this right now.
Well, we're getting to the end of the show here. I think we have about 2 minutes left. I just want to make sure, even though you gave me an opening there, Lois, that we make sure everybody has your contact information. So if you want more information from Lois, it's LOIS, Lois at LOIS, Phillips, PHILLIPS.com. And, I don't want to divert from your question there, Lois, but I think that this is a whole nother conversation. So I
Okay.
think we need a
Okay.
follow-up. We need a volume 2.
Okay. But I do want to say that there's a lot being written about the steps you can take in your company or agency to make women feel honored. It could include somebody who's worked for the company for 20 years and has been so productive. And it could be creating a networking system in your company, monthly lunches. I've
Yeah.
seen that happen really well. And you want to acknowledge the contributions of women in your organization publicly in newsletters and in giving them opportunity for training and mentoring.
Well, Lois, that's beautiful.
Thank
Okay,
you.
ending here. And again, Lois at loisphillips.com is their email, but also go to her website, loisphillips.com. She's an avid writer about women's issues and about women speaking issues. And what's that plug before we end here?
No, I just wanted to thank you for the opportunity to talk about this and to give it value and meaning. And it's not just a matter of an individual being assertive, but workplace cultures can
Yeah.
support women, and they should.
And so just give the title of your book.
The book is let's see, 9 Fast and Flawless Presentations by Women.
Beautiful.
Oh,
They're templates. Follow a template and you've got the perfect pitch.
love
And
it.
see more of that on her website. We're just kind of scratching the surface with Dr. Lois Phillips. So this has been Leadership Development News. Continue to tune in to tune up your performance.